my name is Shlomi Ron. I'm a co-founder and CEO at the Visual Storytelling Institute based here in sunny Miami, Florida. We help marketers like you rise above the communication noise with personalized visual storytelling programs using our 9-step My Visual Story framework. And we do it to really help you connect better with your audience, empower their lives, and grow faster your company. In this episode, I chose one of the most fascinating disciplines in visual storytelling, which is really what is known as branded environments design. And I'm talking about those experiences, most likely if you visited the Google corporate offices of the world, you saw some art on the walls. It could be basically any art expression, from paintings, sculptures, digital experiences that the brands are commissioning artists to support their unique culture in order to engage customers as well as employees. So this is why I'm super excited to have in our show today great friends, Abbey, Melsheimer, and Gustavo, Tonelli. They are the owners of Chilipop, a branded environment design company based here in Miami. And they have an amazing portfolio of clients from all over the world. So welcome to the show, Abbey and Gustavo.
Hi, Shlomi. Thanks for having us.
Hi there. It's great to be here. Thank you for having us.
Excellent. All right. So before we embark on our journey, so obviously it most likely, it wasn't the case where you walk up one day and you become a specialist in brand environment design, right? So maybe if you can share what is called your origin story, how it all started and what did you do before that kind of really got you ready for this journey?
Sure. I studied interior architecture in my undergrad, and from there launched into corporate interiors. Mm-hmm. And that took me around the world, working for all sorts of clients. And in that process, I started to realize and understand the importance of branded environments, and that there was some education that needed to happen around it, and there just seemed to be quite a large opportunity. So through that, I ended up, my fascination at first really began with brand. So I went back and did some further studies, and with a focus on brand, started helping companies, startups, and various people kind of establish their own brand and build their brand. And then through that, kind of merged this idea of branded environments, and the two came together really nicely. So it was definitely an evolution.
Yeah.
In my case, I'm going to start with a little story. I mean, a few weeks back, we were meeting with some colleagues. I mean, they have another firm that operates in the same space that we do, and the creative director of this company was positing about how the challenges of how to recruit someone who work in our type of companies, being as multidisciplinary as we are. Mm-hmm. I mean, you cannot, when you talk to a recruiter, it's really hard to specify what kind of background you're looking at. I mean, it could be anybody, it could be an artist, it could be an accountant. I mean, it's so multifaceted. And I think that I kind of represent this kind of background, if you will, because my studies, my field of studies, marketing, and for most of my professional career, I worked in marketing, communicational companies, the media companies, music, television. But
was it like a traditional marketing or a more digital?
It was traditional marketing. Unfortunately, I don't want to age myself, but
right.
there wasn't a whole lot of that.
Right.
So it was really traditional marketing, and but all through my life, I carried my artistic interests on the side, whether it was music or image making, photography, and then later on, I headed a production studio that where we did a lot of like video productions. So I guess that I bring all of that to the mix, right? It's like my corporate marketing side. I was always fascinated with the power of brands and how better communicate. Obviously, as a marketeer, I mean, you try to communicate that as efficiently as you can. But then, as on my artistic side, it's also wanting to have some sort of like value in how you communicate or you transmit that.
That's fascinating. So it sounds like that, Abbey, you started as a designer, and it's kind of grew into an interest of the brand environment. And you, Gustavo, you started in marketing, but then again, since you nursed your passion on the sideline for for creative visual production, that's how those two led you to this space. So this is great.
True, and I have to say, I have to credit Abbey. She was the first one who interested me, and by learning more of what she was doing and the possibilities and of all the media. I mean, we all through my life I've had. We went from traditional media then to digital media, like you mentioned, and then with her when she pointed to me, well, the space that you occupy is the number one point of communication that you have, and it's like, well, yeah, it never occurred to me before. So,
yeah, no, for sure. No, so this is fascinating. So maybe you can help our audience that's hearing the term brand and environment design for the first time, and it sounds loaded and still ambiguous. What is your definition of this discipline as it really kind of resides in what I see also in the larger world of visual storytelling?
Sure. I would say it's a three-dimensional kind of visual immersive space. So it can exist in many different forms. It can exist in a corporate setting. So what is that setting when you walk into someone's office, and what surrounds you, from the colors of the fabrics that they're using to what's on the walls and the light fixtures and everything. All of that is a part of who they are. I think probably in terms of the listeners, one of the things that they can resonate the most with is a retail experience. If you walk into, let's use something as easy as a supermarket. If you walk into a Publix,
right,
completely different experience than going into, per se, a Trader Joe's.
Yeah.
So there's different values there, there's different qualities, but yet you're doing exactly the same thing. So, everything that surrounds you, whether it's signage, whether it's, again, the finishes that they're using, all of that stuff is a part of the branded environment.
Got it.
I think for us, what it means is like the narrative of that space visually, but in a larger sense, experientially, is never an accident. It's never a leftover of happenstances that happen to occur. It's always a result of purpose and intent, because customers care and they have choices. And if there's something that millennials have taught us, is that would-be employees have choices too. When in generations past, the transactional exchange between an employee and the corporation was very transactional. We pay you your salary, you come work for us. That's the end of it.
Right.
But for kudos to the millennials, they say, hey, I can get a check anywhere I want to go. Why should I commit to work with you? That the pay is not enough. That's so
they're looking for the experience. You got to sell them the full package.
Exactly. So that requires the brands connect, create a stronger bond, but not only with the customers, but with their own workforce. I mean, they want to engage talented people, of course. So we design experiences that allow our clients to connect to their customers, employees, and communities.
Got it. Interesting. Very interesting. So hopefully by now, we got some ears perked in our audience, and they said, "Wow, this is interesting." But tell me more.
We hope that too. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is interesting to me. You got my attention now, but maybe can you help me understand what are the typical business objectives I can get out of brand environment design, both in a employee environment and a consumer environment?
Yeah, sure. Definitely communication, right? I mean, that's what we were talking about in terms of visual storytelling. We're still trying to communicate something. We're communicating could be the company values, and what that brand is and stands for. Another example of communication would be if there was, let's say, two large companies merging, which seems to be happening, seems very relevant nowadays. So two big companies merging, of course, that leaves employees and the community and, you know, maybe even their customers feeling, oh, what's going to happen? A little anxious, a little uneasy about
what is our story now?
Yeah, so it is kind of recommunicating that story, but even recommunicating just to find ease and you know, it may even be something where you start to engage and have some interaction with your community, so that to just kind of like calm things down. Another thing would be cultural relevance. So there's tons of companies now that have global offices and global, global retailers all across the world. So in order to keep that consistent, you clearly have like your overarching brand that is relevant for each and every one. But being able to take that one step further and making sure that, I mean, every culture is different. So making sure that there is cultural relevance, and you are, whatever you are communicating with your employees or your customer is still meaningful and enticing in a sense.
Got it. So it's really interesting. On one hand, you say it's like in cases of mergers, we call it like brand confusion. You know, employees or consumers don't know what the new story is. So brand environment design could help really alleviate this in a space. And the other one you said, which is also interesting, cultural relevance, which is really, but this you're most likely going to find in large enterprises where they have like a headquarters and then they have regional offices. So how you can maintain the regional office experience that respect both the location they are located in, but also the brand, the big brand guidelines that coming from headquarters.
Right. Well, what is interesting there is that, because we hear that a lot, right? It's we always bring as examples the most like forward-thinking companies, tend to be like newer companies, technology companies. Not all of them are big. Of course, you hear the Facebook and the Googles are like the most prominent examples.
Right.
But people would say it's like, oh well, right. Of course, they can afford to do these things because they're big. It's like, well, and that kind of begs the question, right? Because you can easily make the argument that they became big because they embraced this culture from the get-go, right? Like, now they can do it to a bigger degrees and levels, but from the very beginning, they had this ingrained in their culture. So,
right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. So now we got the business objective clear, you know, in terms of what should be my goals. Can you talk a little bit about what the process looks like? You know, what are the steps you're going through engaging a client in a brand and environment design process?
Sure.
Sorry.
That's okay. Do you want to start?
No,
okay.
Yeah.
In a very kind of high level and literal sense, we have like 3 main stages to our process. The first stage, we call the discovery phase. That's where we need to find out as much as we can about the company or the person or whomever the client is. We need to understand everything about the brand. We need to understand everything about their culture, the brand culture, just who they are at the core, because clearly that is the launch pad, and that is something that we need to fully understand. So a lot of times that can get like skipped. People would just want to be like, oh yeah, but
Sure.
it's like the foundation. So it is one of the most important parts.
Right.
We understand the project scope, what they're, are we working with one room? Are we working with an entire floor? Like, what are we, we're working with an entire building? What is that? And kind of
quick question about this comment.
Sure.
In your definition of brand environment design, when you talk about a space, is it always an offline space, or you also do some online offline interplay?
It's usually a three-dimensional space, but we do have a tendency to incorporate digital technology into the space, and that's where we've been operating so far. I think in terms of where technology is going, that has the potential to shift with like AR and VR and that sort of stuff. But for the most part, most of our stuff is in three-dimensional space. It doesn't necessarily have to be in a building. It could be like a pop-up that occurs as a part of a festival or something in that regard. But it is usually like a physical kind of experience.
Got it.
So after the
discovery. Yep.
Yeah, after the discovery phase, from there we go into development, and that's where we really start, the design process. A lot of what we do is led by design. So we'll kind of start with high-level conceptualization, moving through design development. At that point, we'll have a budget review to kind of understand if the design intent is in line clearly with the budget at hand. And at the same time, as we're kind of, there's client approval processes throughout this. So once we get to a point where we know the direction that it's heading, we can also start to search for artists or various styles that we're looking to achieve through that design. Now, when we use the term artist, we use it very, very, very broadly. I think, a lot of people will just think of, when you say artist, a painter, or they do ceramics, or something what appears somewhat obvious. But we use the term much broader, and it can mean anything from an artist being a musician. It can mean anything from an artist who does, kinetic sculptures or installations, digital work,
arts and crafts. Yep.
It's very, very broad. So at that same time as we're going through that design process, we'll also be starting to look at different artists, and we like to try and work locally, just because there is talented people everywhere. So we try to pull from kind of local talent, and it was a similar process, client approval, and then once that artist is also approved, then we move into what is called the delivery phase, which at that point it's all about implementation. So it's making this idea and this concept come to life. So overseeing all the project management and the making sure we stay on budget, schedules, permits, etc. So all the way through the final install.
I want to tap into what Abby said about trying to whenever is possible and whenever makes sense, right? Because at the end of the day, that's king. Like the experience ends up making sense. But we try to, whenever possible, engage local artists because we're both firm believers of communities and the power of communities.
Absolutely.
We were lucky enough, maybe to meet and start working together in Bushwick in Brooklyn, New York, when it was going through a huge expansion, which materialized years later. And then here in Miami, you see it in Wynwood, and we have friends working in Shoreditch in London. There's having communities that rose from nothing, from very the constructed spaces, and you can see how the businesses that embraced it, they all raised with the tide, right? So having a powerful, vibrant community helps. I mean, raises all boats. Like I said, like rising tides, like lifts all boats.
Sure.
So that's what we always would prefer to tap into help generate and create that sense of community.
Yeah, and I think it's also, Gustavo, ties nicely to what Abbey mentioned before about the business objective, one of them being cultural relevance. So when you bring artists from the community, obviously you help paint that local culture and flavors, and that's definitely going to help people feel more comfortable. This is my story. This is something I can connect to. Absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah.
Great. So since you've been doing this for a while now, any kind of major lessons or pitfalls that people should be aware of as they plan for something like this?
The most obvious thing that comes to my mind is just being open-minded as we engage. I think you can run into some instances where someone may be either quite firm on what it is that they want to create, or very firm about a certain way of doing things. And I think that, for us, that takes away the creative process. It starts to subtract from that. So really working with us, but giving us also the freedom to explore and to kind of, figure out what makes the most sense. So
I think that's something that we would like people to be more aware of the enormous power that lays in the communications that they put into their own spaces, right? They speak usually stronger than any other piece of communication that you create out there. And maybe I talk like as a marketeer, but
yeah.
In the sense of sheer marketing dollars, you can put out your campaign and say how special you are and how different than the competition and better. But then if I walk into your store and it looks exactly like any other store down the road or office, or then which one would you think would have more of an impact?
Right.
The ad that you paid in the magazine that I saw, or what I'm actually experiencing myself when I stand in your office. You spend all the money in marketing, and this is way more powerful. So a lot of people see what we do as a cost. It's like, well, I had to spend money in chairs,
Sure.
and they don't realize the enormous potential and value that comes from a marketing standpoint or from a employee retention and attraction tool. It would take you, there's plenty of studies. It will cost you about 8% more to hire the same person to take it to work behind the airport and in a warehouse that to bring him to a cool space and say Wynwood or
right.
whatever. It really, you have to pay them more because you have to compensate for the fact that they're probably going to hate every single hour they spend there.
For sure.
So
yeah. So
to be dramatic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds like the typical misconceptions or pitfalls you come across is one. People that are the opposite of being open-minded. They are all about blast my logo on every wall possible.
Yeah. Which is and that's something that we're seeing and we talked about. It's something that Abbey note a couple of years ago already, that corporations are starting to realize the challenge that is, how they, because how they translate a brand, which is an intangible, into dynamics of a space, because the brand is not a logo or a sign or a color, right? Those are visual metaphors that we use to communicate the identity of a brand. So how do you put that in a space? because yes, you can paint all your offices blue and put your logo on every wall, and is that your message? Is that what you're conveying? That you're boring
Right.
and is that
Yeah.
so how do they? And they're starting to wonder, right? So if I cannot use my logo or my materials, how do we convey a brand from a space? And that's what we're helping to answer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, this is super important. And typically when you start a conversation with a prospect about a project, obviously you've been doing this for a while now. So what are the typical business objectives you come across in both consumer and corporate environment?
Sorry.
So in terms of like, what are they measuring?
What are they trying to accomplish, basically?
Sure. Yeah.
Is it more awareness or sales?
Yeah, it depends, right? So it kind of goes back to one of the previous questions. Like, is it something that they're trying to communicate and engage people?
Mm-hmm.
If it's a retail or hospitality experience, is it about, they may have a objective of simply, we need to get more people in our door, or we need to hit a higher number in regards to sales. So there's those from a high level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No. I think that what she was mentioning is something that we've seen in the last years. Is like the retail side of it, the customer-facing side of it,
mm-hmm.
has seen this is a little bit more ahead of the curve and realizing the importance of space. Particularly, there were in the 90s and 2000 companies that started pushing this idea forward and selling their services, be like a Good Media or Techno Media from Atlanta. They were starting to sell and convey these great experiences for customers. So I think that the retail sector is a little bit more advanced. We're seeing the tech sector and some finance companies are already also seeing it, and they see that is important for their own employees because they need to attract that top talent. But I think that if we trace a line, we kind of see how more and more companies are being aware of. It's not just they need a space for people. That's a tool. And it's a very powerful message that they have to construct.
Got it. So it sounds like, some of the business objectives could be, driving awareness, aligning a specific culture, or obviously in retail, obviously, it's driving sales, but at the same time, telling the story and the experiential brand attributes that goes along with it. So,
and they normally they see it at the end. I mean, even those that at first don't realize the possibilities, it becomes clearly obvious in the change of morale, in the enhanced loyalty. The employees become almost evangelists of the brand. When they enjoy their working space, they tell their friends. So and everybody, even if the client might not come with that purpose in mind, they might have not been their primary reason to reach out to us. It's almost unanimous that once the process is in place, and 6 months later they see it, they experience it in their office. The vibrancy, the mood, the morale, all of that has a clear impact. I know that they bring their friends, the one friends to work there.
So I'm curious. Are you as part of your process providing any specific KPIs, like measurement, after the program is over?
Yeah, it definitely, again, depends per client, because we do work with such a broad range. I would say the most common one would probably be in terms of measuring sales, because it is an easy number to keep track of.
Right.
Another one may be something in terms of, like Gustavo was just touching on, employee retention or
NPS score.
Yeah. So those are probably the two biggest, I would say.
Got it. And to paint a more vivid picture in our audience minds, can you give one or two examples of successful installations? It could be also from the industry.
Sure. I'm going to speak about a very obvious one, I think, but it's a great example of, you know, how a brand can exist and not have like a cookie cutter recipe for it, is Google. And this I can kind of say that a lot of tech companies are starting to kind of go in a similar direction. So having worked with them, I use them as an example. But yes, they have offices all across the world. And I'm going to speak about this in terms of the corporate side of things. All across the world, they all look completely different from one another. Yet when you see it, you automatically go, "Oh, that must be a Google office," you know?
Wow.
So, you know, the idea that you don't have to put your name everywhere.
Sure.
I mean, they do have a tendency to use their colors here and there, but it's not everywhere at all in any regard. There's a huge cultural relevance within their spaces. And then on top of that, they have everything from free food, free cafes and kitchens. They have wellness centers in some of them, gyms, meditation rooms, massage rooms, like, you name it. So they really they're really working very hard to create a culture that people want to be a part of. And the people that I do know that work for them are just, you know, they're so happy. They have the flexibility. Some of them, I'm speaking for, you know, have the flexibility to work from home days. And, you know, they've just created this like open and transparent culture that people are really excited about.
I think that the important thing to note is that we're talking almost indistinguishably from culture and space, right? There's just not a differentiation. I mean, your space is a reflection of the culture of the company.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And I wonder, you know, we talked about typical projects has to do with, as you gave examples of offices or retail environments where it's a permanent installation. Are you also involved in, you know, temporary installations? I would assume that in event marketing is probably, it's very common to create the sense of also it's called experiential marketing, you know, how you can dress up a space for conference or.
Yeah, we have been involved in that. It is a different type of project completely. But I think in terms of where we begin to overlap like brand art and design, we have more success with it on the permanent side, because as soon as you add that like artistic factor, that's a hard thing to just like see
go away. Right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
all of a sudden get thrown away.
Right.
You know, we have had instances where you have something created that moves and it's been it's traveling. But that's less common because it's more costly for them to store it and relocate it.
Right.
So I would say that's not like our bread and butter per se, but we have been involved in kind of the key ones and the right ones.
I did want to go back a second. You asked for examples, and there's one that I really want to tap into, because I don't want people to perceive that if you're not Google or Facebook, then you can afford this, you know?
Yeah.
So, and also I want to mention it because it hits closer to home. I mean, there was a company, it's been acquired since, so still exists, but in the 90s, the Cisneros Television Group opened their offices in South Beach. And they were, one of the reasons why I want to mention is because they're from Miami, but the other one is because they were way ahead of the curve in terms of this type of thing. They first, if anything, they engaged an architectural firm that specialized in museums and art galleries. This was like a corporate office, but they gave them a fill, and they gave someone who knew how to do museums. And they used a lot of new materials at the time. I mean, you wouldn't see them in corporate spaces, resins and acrylics and lighting. And And the interesting thing to me is because it was a relatively smaller company, a newcomer into the industry, and yet they were able to recruit people from HBO, from Viacom, from big powerhouses. And I'm not going to say that they went to work with them because they like their office, because they were cool. But there is something to be said about the return on investment of the firm to provide something rather than, organizing a campaign of what we're going to do. They let the space speak for them, and they were very successful again in stealing or bringing people from bigger companies. So not only the huge successful behemoths work and benefit from these, but also like smaller startups get a return on their money by actively making their brand or the corporate culture clear to anybody.
Yeah, and I think what you said is very important because it really ties nicely with what we said earlier about the common misconceptions that it's not about the size of the company, and it's about being open-minded and really open for transforming your space to be your storytelling platform.
Right. Wouldn't that be a noble thought, right? It's not the size of the company that drives the culture, but it's the culture of the company that determines the size, right?
Exactly. No, so I can totally see that. And since you've been doing this for quite some time now, I'm kind of wondering if you could wear for a moment your prediction hat and kind of talk a little bit about what's ahead in the future for brand and environment design, especially, where on one side you see new technologies like AR and VR coming in. I remember I was involved in when I was heading digital in one of companies, we did a conference and I helped put out this giant interactive social media wall that almost functioned like a digital altar. The attendees, cluster around it, and it was like mesmerizing. So I'm kind of wondering, what do you see the future brings to this space?
Yeah, I think technology is definitely the driver, right? There's, I'm thinking about a hotel experience, which came to the forefront of my mind. So there's companies or hotels in Asia, in specific areas in Asia, that are already using like facial recognition. So when you walk in, recognize your face, and I mean, can you imagine if you already begin to program that? You're someone who travels a lot for work, and you like always stay with a specific hotel, or maybe not, I don't even know at this point, but if you could begin to program that with like, I like the room temperature set to this, I like an extra pillow, it has all of your settings.
Mm-hmm.
And I will have breakfast in the morning delivered to whatever it is.
So it's really personalization, basically. Yeah.
So you can kind of like through the use of technology, you can begin to already like program your experience by just like booking your reservation or when you walk in the door,
right,
without having to manually do everything. So that's
I think
one example.
I would have to agree. I think that augmented reality is what you're going to see the most development and interaction and your experience, right? What do you even see when you walk in?
Yeah. I've seen in some of the hotels actually here in Miami. Some of them are really experimenting with these digital displays that are really out of this world in terms of sometimes it's a localized art, but the ones that really get it are able to use the medium so it can create a dialogue between the audience that actually interact with it and the outer public on the internet in real time. So once you get this real time component, it definitely creates something new, because then it's my story right here, but it's actually broadcasted elsewhere.
Exactly. We still don't know where the whole like Oculus or glasses are going to, and maybe what do you see, what experience, the data that is coming to you as you walk in, it changes person to person, or enhances the experience that you're physically seeing with what you're virtually receiving, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So I'd like to kind of wrap up. This has been a fantastic conversation today. But if you want to kind of summarize it for our audience, the gist of our conversation, you got them now super excited about getting started. What would you say are your top 3 tips to watch for?
Number 1, I would say, is be open-minded, which we kind of already got.
Yeah, we talked. Yeah.
Yeah, to me, it's like again, because of all the education that we constantly do with the people that companies that engage us is, I mean, just realize the awesome power of your space. I mean, there's no amount of marketing money, or there's a lot of marketing money I had to spend to convey the same idea that could be that your physical space can much easier and much more honestly and much more long-lasting can convey.
Right. No, for sure. I mean, open-minded is one thing, and what you said, Gustavo, it's, you know, definitely one of the things that people should pay attention to.
And then the third one, I think that Abbey would say that it'd be like a hire us. That'd be like that'd be the third tip that we have for yeah.
Right. All right, so I want to thank you so much for your time today. It's been always a fantastic journey to chat, and I know we could have talked for hours about this subject, and I hope to collaborate in the future in spreading the word for this great discipline. How can our audience contact you if they have other questions?
Sure. Our website is chilipop.co. It's, everyone always says, how do you spell that? CHILIPOP.co.
Yeah.
There's a contact form on there, or you can email either myself or Gustavo. It's Abbey with an EY at chilipop.co, and Gustavo at chilipop.co. So you can reach you.
Excellent. All right. Thank you so much again for a fantastic conversation today. And for you, the audience, we hope to see you tuned into our next episode. And until next time, don't let your story wait too long.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.